Once upon a time, back before the internet, back before Netflix, DVDs, iPods, and iPads, there was a place called Broadway, and there were people with dreams. Come back with me to 1970, when everything seemed possible. Listen hard. The overture's about to begin. God, how I miss overtures. Maestro! That's enough of that. We don't want the orchestra to go into overtime.
Hello and welcome to Musical Talk. I'm Dominic McChesney, and that was part of the opening number from the new musical Merman's Apprentice, book and lyrics by Stephen Cole, and music by David Evans. And I was lucky recently to have an in-depth chat with Stephen Cole via Skype, where we talked about Merman's Apprentice and many of his other shows. Happily, we've been allowed permission to play some of the numbers from Merman's Apprentice. And so, to start us off, this is A Broadway Star.
And emerging from the subway on 44th and 8th, Muriel finds herself under a magical marquee that reads, Ethel Merman in Hello, Dolly, where she is confronted by a group of autograph hounds.
There's Ethel Merman! Hey, Ethel, look over here!
How many pictures of that loud old broad do you need?
You should talk. You have her autograph 156 times.
You never know when she may die.
Wow, don't you even like her? I mean, she's the greatest star on Broadway.
Like her? I love her. 6 Ethel Merman autographs once got me 2 Joanne Worleys. She may be old and her chins may all sag. Maybe she looks like a trucker in drag, but she's a Broadway star.
You bet your ass, Goldie. That's what I told him. You bet your ass.
Maybe her perfume reminds you of booze.
And she may use language a sailor won't use, but she's a Broadway star.
Did you ever hear the one about the Jew, the priest, and Liberace?
Forget Angela Cheetah and Gwen, she's way ahead.
There are 2 stars on Broadway, Gertie and me, and let's face it, Gertie is dead.
Ha, 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 ha. In 1930, when she got her start, there were no mics, but she tore it apart.
Some guy in China said he heard me fart.
Yes, she can project that far, 'cause she's a Broadway star.
So I told the costume designer, I don't care if it is the 1890s. I want to show some leg and cleavage.
Her calves may be cows and her waistline is gone.
Hey, wait a
Her
minute.
eyes may have bags,
They're by Louis Vuitton.
but she's a Broadway star.
I read that you were giving out the award for Best Director on the Tony.
I know, and it's perfect. I've been wanting to give it to directors for years.
Her hair may be hard,
And her men may be soft.
6 cabbies pulled over,
And I only coughed
'cause she's a Broadway star. She's the kind of a star they don't make.
not anymore.
She will not burn her bra.
Because if I did, you'd all see my boobs hit the floor.
Look, there's Mary Martin. How can you not like a fairy
A nurse.
and a nun on a bike?
Sure, Mary is sweet, but she's also a
She's a Broadway star.
Mary Martin's okay if you like talent. Hey, no autographs. Get the heck out of my way. I've had Abbott and Robbins and Josh direct this day. No matter how much they direct me, each part that I play is the same.
So what if her eyes are a little too near? And what if her breakfast is cornflakes and beer?
I enter and all homosexuals cheer.
Her pictures in every gay bar, 'cause she's a broad.
Oh, please.
We're on
Hey, let me pass. Move your ass.
for the last Broadway star.
Hello and welcome to Musical Talk. I'd like to welcome Stephen Cole, who's joined us for an in-depth interview about many of the things that he has worked on in the past. Stephen, you're a prolific writer of musicals and you've also written biographies, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Well, it's really great to be on the show. Thank you.
I'd like to start. I mean, there's so much I'd love to cover, but I'd like to start with just how you began and found yourself where you are now. What were your first musical memories, and was it something that you were always interested in, and how did that happen?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm a native New Yorker, so I'm very lucky. Born in Brooklyn, and my mother used to bring me into Manhattan, and we would see movies all the time. And I didn't know there was such a thing as live shows. I had records, and one day there was no movie to see, and we were passing by a theater, and I said, why can't we see that movie? And it turned out to be Hello, Dolly at the theater. And my mother went in and bought us two $3 seats. That's right, $3. Yes.
Good grief.
To the last row of the last balcony. And I saw my first live show, and I was knocked out of that balcony. And it just changed my life. But I had always been one of those hammy little kids who wanted to be a performer, and I could sing really well. And so I really started doing that at 14. I was a professional. I did summer stock at 14 and 15 and 16. And while I was in my first summer stock theater at Lake Placid, there was a guy there named Charles Bush, who you know as a playwright, but he was just an apprentice like me. He was a little older, and he and his friend Andy had written a musical, but they had only written the book of a musical, and for some reason they had me read it. It was very big. It was about 400 pages long. Right. Nicholas Nickleby of musicals. And they said, well, what do you think about writing songs for this? And I said, well, I didn't know how they knew that was my secret ambition. And I wrote my first song, and they liked it. And I went home after that. And by the time I hit 15, I decided it was time for me to write my own musical. And I did. Right. And I got together with a collaborator, Alan Matlick, who I met in high school. And we wrote for fun our first show. And then he went off to college while I was still in high school. And he said we could get the show produced there. And we did. And I directed it, and I was in it, and I choreographed it, and he played the piano. We all on stage. We did everything. We painted the scenery. We sold the lemonade at intermission. But it was an incredible experience putting on our own original musical. And I was kind of hooked on that. But it took a while until I was in my 20s when I retired from my performing career to get back to it and write with many other collaborators. So that's sort of how it all started. But it definitely started with movie musicals first, things like Mary Poppins and The Sound of Music, the usual suspects, and then figuring out that theater was even better, and that I was very lucky also to see all of the Sondheim shows from 1970 on, and great musical theater writing was, and I aspired to that. Every time I saw one of those shows, I would think about writing something of my own that would be inspired by it. And so that's kind of how it all happened. And as far as being prolific, I was lucky enough to start out with two different composers at the same time, writing two different shows. And that was really a necessity because one would be busy and the other one would be busy, and I just couldn't not work. So what happened was things started to pile up, and I had many pots on the stove, and it depended on which one boiled first and which one got on. And I was very lucky then to have a backlog of shows that I could keep working on and then getting on the stage. And I've had 13 or so produced, so I'm very lucky. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Which Dolly did you see?
Betty Grable.
Oh, really?
Yes. And then I went back and saw Ethel Merman. That was pretty smart of me. I remember I would go with friends. I mean, really, it was so inexpensive then that kids could go see shows. And to see something a second time, to spend your second $3 was a big deal at that time. But I told this friend, I said, Ethel Merman hasn't been in a show since Gypsy, a new musical. And she had done Annie Get Your Gun. I didn't know everything then. And I said, we really should do this. This might be it. And I was right. She never did another Broadway show. So I'm very happy that I got to see her do that. But first one was Betty Grable, and I'm always grateful to her for introducing me to musical theater.
Now, I think the first show that I came across that you had written, as I remember going into Dress Circle and coming across the cast recording of Night of the Hunter. I remember thinking, gosh, that's a dark subject matter for a show. This is what I think is wonderful about your list of shows is the subject matters and the different types of creation on the different types of shows that you've done. It really is such an incredible variety, from the wackiness, even though it's based in truth, of Road to Qatar. But Night of the Hunter is a very, very dark subject matter. What was it that appealed to you when you saw it and thought, well, this could actually make a musical?
It's a very special piece. How it happened was that Clabe Richardson, the composer who had written The Grass Harp, starring.
Oh yes, that's a beautiful show.
Gorgeous score. I was enraptured with his music, and I pursued him. He was in retirement, and I found him, and I wanted to write with him. What I wanted to write with him originally was a show called Time After Time, which I wound up writing with Jeffrey Saber. And Clabe took a meeting with me. He was impressed with my work, which made me very happy. And but he didn't think he was the right composer for that show, Time After Time. So we sat around and talked for months. We wrote a few songs together just to test out the relationship. And he had this idea forever about The Night of the Hunter, which was based on the novel first by Davis Grover. Yes. It was a famous movie with Rob Mitchum and Shelley Winters. Well, he showed me the movie, and I immediately had the reaction that you might have had. Are you crazy? I said, this is about a preacher who kills widows for their money, and he has love and hate tattooed on his knuckles. Very, very serious stuff. But then I read the book, and the book, which was a bestseller in the 1950s, had the language of a Truman Capote. It was very rich and Southern Gothic and beautiful, and the real story seemed to me to be about the young children, about the children who were given this burden of carrying around $10,000 in the Depression and being chased by this horrible man. So I thought, this is really a story about good and evil. And the film is that, too. The film is so glorious to look at. It's Charles Ludlam's only directing job. And the cinematography spectacular. And it looks like a big Gothic fairy tale. And it was getting into the language of the book that made me realize it could sing. And we started writing together. And Clabe's music is so rich and so Southern and so operatic in some respects that it really just started to click. And immediately we had a grant from the National Endowment of the Arts just to write it, because they were interested in the idea of us doing this serious piece. We immediately had interest from a theater here in New York, and the CD happened because immediately after recording 4 demo songs with Ron Raines, Bruce Kimmel said, I want to do this as my first concept album, not as a cast album, but a concept album, fully produced. And so when we got to that point and had a full score, he did. And it's one of the best CDs. It really is. I remember it got reviewed by Billboard and said, this is the best CD I've ever heard to introduce a new show. And it really is glorious. And it's Ron Raines, and it's Dorothy Loudon, it's Sally Mays, it's Marshall Lewis, and it's a 26-piece orchestra. And so it gives you a sense of what the show really is. And I'm very, very proud of it. And the show's been done also, since then, several times, San Francisco and Dallas and here in New York.
Yes.
Sometimes with smaller orchestras because it's pretty expensive, 26 piece. And it's a glorious piece. And ultimately, it has plenty of humor, dark humor. And the opening number for the preacher is called The Lord Will Provide. And it details all the widows he's killed and how nonchalant he is about it because the Lord told him to do it. And that's basically he's sticking to that. And then, of course, the character of Rachel Cooper, who was played by Lillian Gish in the film and Dorothy Loudon on the CD, is this warm earth mother, fairy godmother who saves these kids. And really what we find out in the finale, that little children will always abide, that they can get through the worst horrible things and still survive. And you look at a movie like Room, which won some awards last night at the Oscars. It's the same kind of thing, how little children can get through anything. And it's inspirational. And the preacher gets his in the end, so it's okay.
Yes, indeed.
It's an exciting piece too. It's a thriller. It's a true musical thriller, and you're wondering how are they going to get away, and that's the most important thing. And as a writer, I will tend to think that music and lyrics together, they can't be the same thing. You're best if the music is the emotion, and I think it was E.Y. Harburg who said that. Words make you think a thought, but music makes you feel a thought. And so you add it on, and the feeling should come from there. When something soars, and it could be the simplest of words, and they shouldn't be flowery, perhaps, and they shouldn't be overwritten. I believe in underwriting, in lyrics, and let the music take you somewhere else. And some of the experiments I've had in writing for musical theater are being the opposite of what the music is, letting the words say one thing and letting the music say another, so that there's a subtext for the actor to play. And the music is the subtext, and they don't necessarily know why they're feeling a certain way, but the music can help tell that. And the audience, of course, gets that too. Then the audience is an actor and part of it, because they're getting the subtext from the music, if it's really good music.
I was interested to read about Piano Bar. It's billed as an interactive theatrical experience. So you're actually making the audience part of the action in that. How do they interact so much with the show?
That's the simplest of shows. It's the complete opposite. I mean, that show was brought to me, a great idea. It was about the closing night of a piano bar. And it could be anything. And here's a bunch of characters who always go to this piano bar. So obviously the audience is the audience in the piano bar. And obviously I needed to create many moments where they would be part of the show, just as you would be in a piano bar. So there's not just singing along, but there are games. There are people who get up and do things that they might not have done, and especially because the whole thing takes place at the closing. So it's the opposite of a real musical. It's real. It's totally realistic. It takes place in that hour and a half that we're there. People are drinking. They are acting the way they're acting. The only unrealistic part is that some people are playing the wait staff or the piano player, and there are surprises that pop out of the audience that we have plants with characters. But mostly it's a big fat vaudeville. It's not. The plot is very thin. We're closing. What are we going to do? We're going to close is basically by the end of it. They try to save it for a few minutes, but more than that, it's one great act following another, and it's just pure entertainment. And when we've done it in nightclubs, which is the only place it belongs, in a nightclub or a real piano bar, not in a theater, it is done brilliantly. I've heard people screaming with laughter, and the more drinks we give them, the more they laugh. I don't know how that works. But it was a lot of fun to work on, a lot of fun to be in the audience and feel that kind of. I think as much as I love writing very serious pieces, also I get my most pleasure when people are laughing. It is more immediate, and you know how the show is going. You know, in a serious show too, you can feel the room. Believe me, if you hear a lot of coughing, you know you're not doing as well. I've seen people snore.
Oh God, right.
Oh yes, yeah. I've thrown things at old ladies at matinees.
Oh, well, I've done that on my trips to New York. I scared someone very badly in Matilda when I was in London. And someone was talking at the beginning of Act 2, and I launched myself from my seat, screamed at this woman, and I think she nearly had a heart attack there, but, so... I have jumped slightly here because you've had many shows that have started live or have been produced in London as well. So for people in the West End and people listening in London, maybe we can talk about some of the shows that they might have seen there. Now, the most recent one is Merman's Apprentice, which I'd like to get back to a little bit later because I want to look at that in depth. But I do remember, and I was reading about Casper, but I don't think you were involved when it...
No, that was a different version. I saw it there.
Right.
Although it is related. It's the Ugly Stepsister shows.
Yes.
Casper was created and done in London first, and one of the authors, the two authors actually, were asked to do it again in America, but only if there would be some drastic changes. And
right.
I was asked by the producer to go and see it, and I went and saw it in London. It didn't do anything for me. I didn't care about it. And then suddenly, months later, I was called and asked to work on it by the American writer and director. And he was so complimentary about another one of my shows, which actually was After the Fair, which had been done in London, which is the reason I was there. It was done at the King's Head in Islington. And right after it was done off Broadway. And so I was there at that time for that, and that's why I went to see Casper with my collaborator Matthew Ward, who wrote After the Fair with me. So when I was asked first to come on board and just work on it and fix it, I said, no, I don't want to do it. I just had no desire to write that show until he complimented me so much that I met with him. And my goal was to not do it. So I said, well, the only way I will do Casper is to write a whole new show using the same character, the friendly ghost, with all new everything. And they said yes. And so I couldn't get out of it. And I had an idea about doing a fabulous villain, a woman named Magdalena Monteverdi. I named her after a bottle of wine. and I thought it should be something fabulous, like the oldest woman in the world who still looks wonderful. And I thought of Chita Rivera. And I wrote it with her in mind, never dreaming that I would really be able to get her to do it. Meanwhile, the show, literally, this was Christmas time, and the show was going to be on in June in America, in Pittsburgh.
Right.
And so I had that much time to write a whole new show. I brought Matthew Ward in on it. We wrote all new songs. We kept a couple of the things from the other show. I think we had to write literally to the same set. They were bringing the set over to America. So I had to use whatever was in that set.
Yes.
It was a real task. And I had a wonderful time writing it. And I had a blast writing for this character. And then I did a benefit where a tribute to Chita Rivera, and I got to know her a little. And we offered her the show. And it was going to tour all summer, right before she was going to go off and do The Visit. And so she said yes. The money was right. The timing was right. And so now I'm really writing a show for Chita Rivera, which was a dream, and putting in all these new dance numbers because she could still dance then very well. And it was really heaven. And that's how that came to be. So the show that anybody saw in London is not the same show, except for the same logo and the same set. They used puppets, and we used real people for some of the ghosts. And we did a lot of flying effects. There were a lot of flying kids. It was a blast, and I got to write some silly, funny musical comedy stuff, and the score is delightful, and it played all summer all over the country. So, and I got to know Chita really well, and then wrote stuff for her club act, which she took to Australia, and she's still a friend, and it's really kind of wonderful. So
the villains, the songs for her are incredible. They're wonderful. I mean, they're just great, good old villain songs that you want to put your teeth into. And I always like it when a strong character like that has really nasty want songs.
She was
a better word.
She was funny.
And people can see clips of that as well, can't they, on your website, which we'll give information about at the end of this.
And we have not done the show since. It's oddly enough, the rights to that little ghost, that little cartoon character, has passed from one big company to the next. And
Yes.
so even though the people have asked to do the show, it's sort of in a limbo, which is a shame. They did it in Australia. I was happy to know about that.
Oh, did
Sydney.
they? Excellent.
Yes, in Sydney. And I was stupid enough not to go. I should have gone. I never been to Australia. It's still on my list.
Oh, you must go. It's wonderful. They have a very good theatre scene as well.
Oh, I know. And I have great pictures from that Sydney production, but that's about it. So I was happy they did that. And that was a lot of fun to just dive into that kind of musical comedy, which I've done a lot of since. Because, as I said, After the Fair was right before that, which was a Thomas Hardy short story, which was one of my favorites. It's 4 characters. It played off Broadway. It has a CD. And then the production in Islington was ideal. It was really beautiful, mostly because in America, where it had been done in Texas and places like that, it was always a problem dealing with the accents. North Country accent especially, oh my goodness. And then even just really taking the time to explain the class system and why this illiterate maid could not really marry this barrister, even though she does. And in England, it was like, oh, yep, sure, we get it, fine. Here's the accent, and it worked. It's one of my favorite shows. A beautiful piece, very.
Does it work? And it works very well in, I suppose, the intimate setting of suddenly the. Was it at the King's Head?
Yes, it was at the King's Head, and at that time, the performing space was even smaller. And so 4 people seemed like 100.
Yes.
And you couldn't see below their waist. But so it was almost like doing a musical in complete close-up. It was great. It was great.
Now, you mentioned this a little bit earlier on, and I don't know whether it's changing now with the differences between London audiences and the US audiences. Is, sometimes shows get changed, or, suddenly details will get changed if they're going to have an American production. But I've noticed that things don't often get changed that regularly if they're going to be in the West End. I've often thought that a bit strange thing, because it kind of almost hints that American audiences are not willing to get certain sensibilities, whereas English people will just accept them. I mean, that sounds totally rude and arrogant, but
I don't know. I know in the past, old classic shows used to be changed quite a bit, lyrics. When Little Me went over to London, it became completely anglicized.
That's very true, yes, of course.
Obviously, I did not have to change anything in After the Fair because it was British, although I had to become more authentic. So when working with the producer over there were things he would say, well, that, you have to change that a little bit and then to make it more authentic. And I did. But shows like The Road to Qatar, which is American, taking place in the Middle East, I felt audiences over there and in Edinburgh got it just as well, if not better. In fact, I think there was less of a PC audience. In America, everybody's so scared to laugh at things that they might be considered politically incorrect. And I didn't feel that way in England at all, because we make fun of everybody in Road to Qatar, from Arabs to Jews to our mothers,
Absolutely. I mean, for those people who don't know, Road to Qatar is the true story of what happened when you created and produced the spectacular that is Aspire in Qatar.
The first American musical to premiere in the Middle East. Yes, we were, I got an email that said, we want you to write musical, how much? And it began a 9-month ridiculous journey to this enormous show done in the Aspire Sports Academy, with the largest domed soccer stadium in the world at the time. And it opened the soccer stadium. In fact, we were the second show to play there. The first was Cirque du Soleil. So you can imagine how big it was. And we did this enormous musical with a full West End cast, great actors that went over there, with Croatian acrobats and Russian ballet dancers. We're about 150 people in this show. Camels pooping all over the place, falcons, anything they could throw at it, and anything I wrote wound up on the stage as if it were a movie. Big ships came in at the Odyssey and this, anything and it was insanity, and wonderful insanity. And so when we finished doing it, we thought, well, this is a show about writing the show, and that's That's the Road to Qatar, which is Bob Hope and Bing Crosby movie come to life in today.
Yes. I was watching the documentary, The Road to Qatar. I had tears in my eyes because I couldn't believe the spectacle, and there was fire eaters and acrobats and flying, and it's incredible to watch. So I do recommend people hunt that out.
That's on YouTube. David Crane, my collaborator who I met doing this whole thing, put that together from the footage that was left to the Italian documentary crew. A lot of things didn't happen at the end. The documentary was never finished, even though they shot a lot of footage, because there was no money. The actual show was filmed with about 5 cameras, and it's never been seen again because there was no money. At the end, for some reason, there was no more money, including to not pay David and myself, and all of that. So the road to Qatar is filled with us talking while we're in the Middle East, and talking beautifully about the whole experience, we because the bad stuff hadn't happened yet.
I was wondering when I was watching it, because I know Road to Qatar, and
some of it had, but of course, if you have a camera pointed in your face and you're in the Middle East, you're going to say nice things.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it is definitely worth people checking out the Road to Qatar, the documentary, and seeing that. And I'm not sure whether I'd recommend people to listen to the Road to Qatar first, or it's certainly a fantastic journey to go on both those trips.
And what's really interesting currently is that we are now, Aspire itself is an absolutely glorious score.
Yes, beautiful.
And we did some demo recordings after the fact with the 75-piece orchestra, because that was recorded in Bratislava and orchestrated by Larry Blank and conducted by him. And he works a lot on the BBC now. And he did an incredible job. So we came to America with the tracks, recorded some demos, and now it looks like we may get a performance from a symphony orchestra of an oratorio version of it, where there'll be narration, do about 45 minutes of the score, and it is absolutely the opposite of the Road to Qatar, which is pure musical comedy. They only share one song together, which is the title song, Aspire. Otherwise,
sung by the Bratislava, the choir to Inspire.
Bratislava Opera Chorus. All of that is true. You see it in the documentary.
I was laughing my head off when I was watching the documentary, remembering the song and the moment in Road to Qatar as well.
It's true. Oh my, yes.
So will you downscale it and just have one falcon and one camel this time?
No camels.
No camels.
We had in the Road to Qatar we had a wonderful puppet camel at the end of a number called Oh What a Show, which the one musical number encapsulates everything that went wrong during the performance of the show. It was something else, and I probably invented a lot of it too. Made it.
It's a wonderful story, and the fact that when you say that everything you hear is true, and what an adventure. Like you said, you didn't get paid.
Well, we got 2/3 of our payment, so we did okay.
Okay.
We did okay, and it was. I'm not complaining too much, but I was complaining then, especially because I'm book and lyrics, so I'm 2 jobs. So I lost two salaries because we always thought the whole thing would wind up being wonderful, the experience, and it was up to a point. I really thought that I would be doing a lot more shows in the Middle East, that I'd do all my shows on the Baba Ganoush circuit, as I say. And also because we really became friends with these people, we thought this could never happen where they would gyp us, and unfortunate. I really thought that this would just go on forever, and my feeling is that they just ran out of money.
Yes, indeed.
That was it. It cost so much. There were sets that didn't even get on the stage that were so big that they couldn't fit.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Well, the wonderful thing is that Road to Qatar came out of it, the smaller show.
And that only has 5 characters, and so it's very producible. and does very, very well. I'm very proud of that show. And I also do a one-man version of the whole story, which is a lot of fun to play all the parts myself. It's gotten to a point where I don't know which is fact and which is fiction anymore. Whatever gets the laugh is true.
Now, I've also noticed that, and I hadn't heard of this show until I was doing a bit of research, but Rock Odyssey. You've done these great shows. You've done adult shows and family shows, and is Rock Odyssey aimed at children? Is that a children's show?
Yes, it was originally commissioned to be a family show, which of course really means bring the kids. And mostly kids. And there is a company called Walden Media, which is a movie company, and they decided to get into theater. And they opened a theater in Denver, and they commissioned 2 seasons worth of brand new family musicals, and 2 of them were mine, which I was really very, commission is the greatest word in the English language, you know.
Absolutely, yes.
Paid up front. And so one of them, their idea was to do a rock version of the Odyssey. And once again, it was kind of crazy. The Odyssey, I had to study the whole Odyssey and boil it down to 80 minutes. And now it's been boiled down to 60 minutes. So it's quite a lot of things not there. But it's the only show that I've ever written where I only did the book. I didn't do the lyrics also, because the music and lyrics are by Billy Strauss, who's an Emmy Award-winning rock guy. And we worked closely together, although we never met. We did it all via email and things and tapes. And we did that show, and it was the first show that they did at Walden Family Playhouse. And then it went away, and we got our rights back after they went away after a few years. And then suddenly this theater in Miami, Florida, the Arts Center, decided they wanted a 10-year license on the show, exclusive for the whole USA. So they paid us a bit of money, and they do the show at least twice a year, and they invite all of the school kids of Miami for free. Thousands of kids are being exposed to musical theater and the Odyssey at the same time. And it's been going on for 6 years now. They've got 4.
That's fantastic.
It is. It's fantastic to know that these kids are like me, who went to see Hello Dolly, and these are inner city kids who just flip out. There's great video on YouTube of them also from several years ago, where you see all these kids talking, and they go on the news. Actually, they say, "Oh my God, it was so funny, it was so great," and somebody on the news says, "I never thought I would hear the word funny and the Odyssey in the same sentence." And it's part of their curriculum, so they're studying the Odyssey in school, and then they see this musical version of it, which is accessible to them with rock and roll music. And I'm very proud of that. And in fact, I'm trying to now. I suddenly thought, well, okay, they have the United States. Why can't I get this in the UK or Canada,
absolutely,
or English-speaking country? Because I'm very proud of that's been happening all these years. And the second show that came out of that was called Merlin's Apprentice, where I only did the lyrics, not the book, on that one. And that was delightful as well. But when I was commissioned to do that, that's exactly how Merman's Apprentice came about. I said, I don't want to do Merlin's Apprentice. I want to do Merman's Apprentice. And it was a joke. And it stayed in my head for years, the joke of it, until I started to write a short story about a little girl named Muriel Plackenstein who runs away from home in 1970, gets off the subway and sees that Ethel Merman is in rehearsal for Hello Dolly. They meet. They go to lunch at Sardi's together, and Ethel takes her back to rehearsal. They sing together, and the great producer David Merrick overhears them and decides to star the 12-year-old girl in the first all-child cast of Hello Dolly.
Well, he'd done every other version of it.
Yes, exactly. He said it's either that or, Jack Benny in drag, or put Lassie in the red dress. So that was my conceit, and it turned out to be Merman's Apprentice, which I'm so damn proud of.
So let's talk about Merman's Apprentice, because the cast album is coming out very soon. It's being re-released, I believe.
Yeah, it was released officially in January when we did the big second concert at Birdland here in New York. But there's a new distributor. Allegro is distributing it for J Records. So they're putting it out wider in North America. A lot of people have bought it already. So I hope they'll buy it twice. It should be great. Excellent. But you can get that on Amazon.com on April 8th. There's going to be a whole new wider release of it through J Records, and Allegro is distributing it. So it's kind of exciting. We'll get more of North America. It was kind of only in the continental United States, so all of my Mexican friends and Canadian friends can order them now.
And it's still available on iTunes and other places, is that correct?
Correct. It's on iTunes, on J Records site. Also, Dress Circle in London has been selling them. Actually, all over the world, because I know people have bought it in Asian countries, so it's kind of exciting, yeah. But I guess we get to get a second release out of it, yeah.
Excellent. I hope it does very well.
Thank
you. It deserves to. I got the recording a couple of weeks ago, and I can't stop listening to it. I honestly think it is brilliant, and it has me roaring out loud. One of the things that struck me, and I wanted to ask you about this, is that there are moments in it, and I wondered how much of some of the things that Merman says in the show were actual quotes from her.
Some are, and some are literally from conversations I had with her.
Of course, because you knew her, didn't you?
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. I knew her for the last 2 years of her life. That's why I was able to write a human being. She is not a caricature, because to me, the Ethel that I knew was a vulnerable, funny, bawdy lady who happened to be the biggest star on Broadway. But she enjoyed that, but her best friends were still her friends who were secretaries with her when she was in her 20s. And then she also had lots of show business friends. So she really was a good friend to me, and I was not in any way affiliated with her professionally. It was just, I was like 20 and she was 75, and it was an interesting friendship, and she treated me like an equal. So that's what came out of the character, and a lot of the things she did say to me. There were even more that I left out. They just weren't working. She was just very, very funny. But Taking the Veil, which is my favorite song in the show, really came from, she really said that. She said it on the Merv Griffin show. She said, I can't do another long run of a show, because to me, doing a show is like taking the veil. I become a nun. It is our favorite song in the show, and it might have been the first song we wrote for the show. And I thought this was such a great idea to write a lyric about what it's like to do 8 shows a week for 40 years and put your personal life on hold, and the kind of energy and focus one needs. And so I wrote that lyric, and David Evans just wrote a wonderful melody. And to me, it's the heart and soul of the show, because it shows how important she held her stardom and how much work it really is. And in the show, she's mentoring this 12-year-old girl, and she said, you have to know what it's really like.
Okay, so let's have a listen to Taking the Veil.
Yes, please.
Muriel, how do you think I got through 40 years of 8 shows a week? Being a Broadway star, it's not a job. It's a calling. It's like taking the veil. 8 shows you show without fail. No matter how you may feel, you show or the show is a failure. It's like taking a vow. 8 shows you show and you bow. You give your all, that's the deal, no matter what happens to ail ya. Yes, you give up a lot every day just to get through each night till you're done. To them, you're a luminous star, but what you are, kid, is a nun. You're alert on day 1 and dead by day 4. So, Muriel, baby, beware what you pray for. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm happy belting a song. But by Saturday night, your belt starts to tighten, your knuckles get white, and you wail. But till you go home and make your Saturday supper and break out the mail. You recover on Sunday and start again Monday, taking the veil.
But there's gotta be more. What about all the glamour, the people at the stage door?
Oh, sure. You exit at 11, you say goodnight to Max. The crowd's been there since 10, and not one has got a pen. Still you smile as the mob attacks. Oh, Miss Merman, you were great, you were swell. You say thank you, but you know you were great. You were swell, yeah, but they didn't even see the show. And the ink gets on your fingers, but you sign until you're blue. Then they all want a picture, a handshake, a kiss, and what do you get? Their flu. Your standby goes on as a fill-in while you have to take penicillin, and the grosses go down as you're blowing your nose. The producer has conniptions and he threatens to close. So before you are well, though it's hell, you come back to the show, 'cause you know that if you're a hit, then you're a slave and that's it. If you're signed for a year, you make it appear that you're fresh when it's clear that you're stale. So just try to get through the week without having to speak. Kid, this isn't the life for the meek or the frail, but it's the world that you covet, so you better love it. Taking the veil. Good reviews are all baloney when Mary Martin wins the Tony. What's life in the theater, my dear? It's taking the veil.
I think that a lot of people who work in the business, I think a lot of people will identify with that immediately.
I totally agree. And what about Clea Blackhurst singing that? Oh my God.
Oh, she is fantastic. The whole cast are on.
We were very lucky. Incredible cast on the CD. Let's hope we keep them all together for the full production. And as far as the funny lines, some of them are real, some of them are not real. They came from me. It was very easy to write for her and to write that kind of comedy in, and then also to put the pathos in as well.
You do get that, even though I haven't seen the show itself. Merman has this reputation of being such an icon, and suddenly I think the English view of Merman is very different maybe from the American one, because she's very much at a distance. She is just this loud figure on the stage, which is weird, because I was actually asking my mother. My mother's, she's in her late 80s, and I asked her, what do you know about Ethel Merman? And she went, I remember going to see Call Me Madam. She said they sat there, and she said, I just felt like I was being shouted at. And she said, at one point I turned around and went, I don't want to watch this. And I said, well, that's such a shame, because she is such an incredible character. And the more you watch her, the more you realize. And then I told her the famous story that Gershwin said to her, don't ever have any singing lessons. But my mother was very much of the Mary Martin school. So,
and I love Mary too. I love Mary.
Yeah, you've done shows about her as well.
Yes, I have one show about her, Inventing Mary Martin. But yeah, no, Merman, there are people that are actually shocked and surprised when they see film clips from the 1930s, when she sang torch songs. She could do anything. The main thing that she was an incredible comedian. And I think if you saw her on the stage, you got that. I was lucky enough to see her in many, many concerts, symphony concerts, and of course Dolly, but nothing else as a character. But if you just want to see one thing, I'd say get the film version of Call Me Madam. She is fantastic in that, and anything but shouting in your face.
In fact, I've spent this morning watching her, and I couldn't stop watching all these different clips.
No.
And you have the 10 favorite
yes
clips of Merman appearing on television, and The one with Fred Astaire is incredible.
It's genius, yeah.
It's brilliant the way they work together, and it's just effortless. And like her singing when she's hitting those notes, and then the other one with her, Judy Garland, and Barbara Streisand.
Oh, incredible!
It's hysterical, and because Barbara is so green.
I was lucky enough to have her come to my house for parties and show her all these clips. And in those days, there was video, but there was no internet, so there was nothing. Now it's so easy to go click, click. And I had very rare clips of her from 1930, and I got to show her all these things and get her reactions right then and there. Things like with the Garland. I asked her then, what was it like working with Judy Garland? I mean, she said, well, she never came to rehearsal the whole week. She said she'd show up and she'd do it, and she was great, and she never rehearsed once. And she said we'd all be scared and rehearsing our asses off, and she just showed up. And she wouldn't hear a bad word against her. She said, no, she was a sick girl, but boy, did she deliver. Amazing. And she worked with every great star. That's what I tried to show in those clips. It's kind of incredible. Sinatra and everybody. But watching her react to herself singing was very funny. One of the films she made in 1930, when she was in Girl Crazy, she was watching herself and she said, I sound so tinny there. She criticized herself.
She's one of those stars that I would kill to go back and see actually perform on stage.
Yeah, I would like to see a lot more myself. But I'm just so lucky to have known her, and you would have enjoyed her. She was just a lot of fun, very funny. We once went out to dinner it was Ethel and her friend Benet Venuta and 20 men. And she said, all right, we're all going to sit boy, girl, boy, girl. That was her.
And now Merman's Apprentice, you had the production.
It was at the Landor, and then we did another one near Covent Garden also. But those were not full productions. That was part of the Page to Stage Festival, which we had so done with Road to Qatar. And we were just sort of testing the waters. They were fully staged readings with books.
Yes.
And with Kim Criswell as Ethel Merman. She was quite wonderful. We had been developing it in America, of course, and then that happened. And then we came back here again. And we did some concert versions at the famous Birdland here in New York. And that the CD came from, starring Clea Blackhurst. So we're still looking for that first production. Right now there are some commercial producers and money is being raised, and that's the next step. But we decided to go another way by making the CD, the actual cast album of the concert. And it's turned out really well. We're very proud.
It's a fantastic recording. It's really good.
You would think the show's already been done on Broadway. It's so amazing. But we did that with Night of the Hunter too. So it's in line of how do you sell your show, and because people have little imagination to just hear demos, you got to give it all. And so now they can hear it all, and people love the score, and we'll see what happens next. But the idea is to get full productions also in London, because you talk about reactions. The reaction in London was exactly the same as it was in America. The same laughs, the same applause, the same fun, and the same pathos. But I think, you know what? I think audiences are smarter than we give them credit for.
I agree.
People read. We all watch each other's television shows now. So I'm an Anglophile, so nothing gets past me. I get it all. And I'm sure everybody's watching American TV at the same time as they're watching BBC, so they're getting it.
And I think maybe the audiences aren't expected to be as intelligent as they really are, because this is where having people taking chances on original shows it kind of gets led down. And now I think that Broadway and the States give more chance to original shows than I think the West End do. I think the West End tend to always go for safety and think, let's make sure it's based on a movie or something like that, or jukebox musical.
Well, I think we're still living in perilous times. I think all theater is so expensive that taking a chance on anything is huge. It's huge because you can lose everything, and it's very hard on writers. People say, "Oh, where are the new writers?" And I go, "They're all here. They're all out there writing new stuff, or they're giving up because they're not getting their shows on." Even in regional theaters, which used to do more musicals.
Yeah.
I'm lucky. It's been 20 years since my first musical, Dodsworth, was produced regionally, starring Hal Linden and Dee Hoty, and it was fabulous. But now it wouldn't happen. That big musical wouldn't get on the way it got on then with Stars. Those people did take chances, and they succeeded. And you learn different things by working with stars than by not working with stars. You learn how to tailor things to people like that who are going to go out there and the audience knows who they are already. And that's pretty wonderful. But it changes the way you write. So yes, I have been very, very fortunate in that respect. And just having done it at the time I did it, John Kander, who's been a mentor of mine, once said, new generations have no chance to fail. He did. He was able to write Flora the Red Menace. It failed on Broadway, and their next show was Cabaret. Now, if you get one chance on Broadway and you fail, forget it. You're gone. You're done. And that you wouldn't get a chance to write Cabaret. And if you look at Kander and Ebb's whole career, which is huge, there are lots of flops in there too.
Well, some of their favorite shows of Kander and Ebb's shows are flops.
They're fantastic musicals. I mean, even in recent years, since Fred Ebb's been gone, they've had The Visit was fabulous. The Scottsboro Boys was fabulous.
Yes,
those were great shows, and they were not successful. It's a brilliant piece. But it's also a difficult piece, and that speaks to, oh my God, you're really writing a musical about that, and I loved it. I was just knocked out, and I saw it when it was still off Broadway at the Vineyard, and I was just bowled over by that kind of theatricality, and that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, forget about the big sets. It's just a bunch of guys, doing a minstrel show. It was really amazing. So, but their career could never happen today. The length of it, just as a Sondheim wouldn't happen today. I mean, when I think about going back in time and seeing one show every year from Stephen Sondheim, going from Company to Follies to Night Music to Pacific Overtures to Sweeney Todd, all in the 1970s, and nobody has that kind of track record anymore. It just doesn't happen. Least of all a genius like that. So
well, and the funny thing is that so many of his shows that were flops have now become absolute classics.
Absolutely, absolutely, yep, absolutely. But it's a tough career, and I'm still doing it, and I still have 3 or 4 things on the burner at the same time, and one starts to wonder.
Well, if you're still there and you're still doing it, then you've got to be doing something right. So.
Yeah, it's something right. Absolutely.
So I'm very much looking forward to hearing more about Merman's Apprentice and where that goes on, and certainly looking forward to hearing about the full-scale production. And if it happens to fall on my travels, I shall definitely be there to see it.
Oh, yeah. We're looking forward to it, too. I have phone calls to make after you and just keep stirring the pot and get the producers. We're still talking to directors also, so it's we're working on it. We're working on it. And also working on getting my other show, the other one on the other burner, the Black and White Ball. That's also happening. They're kind of sister shows in a way, because they both contain a character that is real. One has Merman and one has Truman Capote, involved with fictional characters, but during a real time. And that's been a lot of fun to play with. They're both totally original shows, original stories, and using real life people. And so that one really, perhaps it's funny as well, but it has a little more serious quality to it.
How did that one come about? Where did the idea for that come from?
I just wanted to write a story about the Black and White Ball, which was a famous party that Truman Capote threw 50 years ago in 1966 at the Plaza Hotel to celebrate really to celebrate the success of his book In Cold Blood. It was such a smash book. And I've always been intrigued by Capote himself and his writing. I'm a major fan. But I had this bizarre idea that what if some teenage black girl decided that she wanted to go to the black and white ball because she thought it would really be a black and white ball. And that in 1966, when racial tensions were so high, she could change the world somehow by integrating. And it was really a party for 500 of his closest friends. Every celebrity in the world was invited. And the idea of this girl from Brooklyn, New York, who's black to boot, wanting to go. I also it started to become about outsiders. She's an outsider in her own race, wanting to be in with those kind of people. And he was always a champion of outsiders because he was the biggest outsider. So putting these characters together seemed intriguing to me. And I started to work on that story with Todd Ellison, the composer. And we've done also another concert version of it in Chicago, which was very successful. And we're looking to see what comes next. We've never exposed it in New York. And now it's time. It's a great show. And if you've seen any of the clips from that, we have some of
I have, yes.
It's a great score, and I'm very proud of it. In fact, I've just been reading more and more Truman Capote recently just to get my mind back around him, because he's a lot of fun to write. Now, him I never knew, so it's all coming out of my imagination and everything I've seen and read. But it's a lot of fun, and he's funny, and he's interesting, and a genius, a true.
I mean, I know his work, but I think the only time I've ever seen clips of him was in Murder by Death. I think
yes, as an actor, yeah, he wasn't the greatest actor, but I remember.
I'm glad it's there.
I grew up seeing him on talk shows, on chat shows, on TV, and so the real person came through. He was an outsider. He was he was gay before there was such a word. He was out there. He had the best friends in the world. He hung around with society people and rich people, and he was an interesting. And so everything I've read about him has just been fascinating. And the other connection was that since Clay, my late collaborator, wrote The Grass Harp, he did know him. Because it's been a story. Yeah, he was around when they did the musical, so that was interesting always. But I never thought of this story while Clay was still alive, so we didn't do it. We only did 2 shows together, The Night of the Hunter and Gross Singers, complete opposite of that show. That was the other side of the coin, taking place in the Catskill Mountain Resort. But the Black and White Ball still continues to intrigue me, and the whole idea of outsiders being better than insiders. I like.
It has a lot of resonance with things that are going on now as well.
Totally. I mean, racial troubles have only gotten worse, and it's very interesting to approach race in this way, and I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it, and at the same time, not making it a heavy show about race.
Yes,
it's more about being yourself within whoever you are, and dealing with the cards that are dealt you, and characters grow, both of them.
Yes,
I think just the idea of the naivete of this 16-year-old girl who is allowed to dream. That's the big thing. We always think, well, when she grows up, she'll become Oprah because she was allowed to dream.
Yes.
And I like that a lot. Not here's your place, stay in your place. No, I can be anything I want to be, including go to that ball, which she does. So it's a Cinderella story too. Little Cinderella, Little Pygmalion, lots of different versions of it. And then I have a whole new show that I'm working on with David Crane, who from The Road to Qatar, and that's also totally original. But that's at a point now where we're about to do some kind of readings. It's called By the Book, and it addresses the issue of, haven't you ever wished you lived in a different time, and would the what would happen if your wish came true? And that's what happens in this story. I won't tell you too much more about it, but I'm very.
Okay.
It's big, and it takes place in Hollywood in 1949, so kind of interesting.
I read the little teaser that's on your website, so I think we'll just leave that for other people to hunt down and find.
Great.
You've worked with, as well as writing all these wonderful shows, and you've written a lot of material for a lot of stars and for the Drama League shows, and you've written a lot of material for that. And one of the people that I hadn't really been aware of in my musical theatre knowledge until I started reading posts from a certain Facebook group that I'm a member of.
Yes.
But I wasn't really aware of Dorothy Loudon.
Wow.
And I have to say that the more I've read and the more cast recordings that I've heard and little bootlegs here and there and things like that, what an incredible character and performer she really was.
Oh, she was fabulous, and I was so lucky to know her too. Dorothy. She stars on the Night of the Hunter CD, but I knew her before that because of writing that special materials. Writing special materials fun in some respects because it's completely different than writing for characters in a show. You're writing for a real personality, and basically they're mostly comedy songs. So they have to be boom, 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 joke, boom, 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 joke. And you've got to get those. And so that was always interesting and fun to do. It's like stretching your muscles. And one day I was asked to come in and work on a show that went to Broadway called Comedy Tonight, which lasted about 2 minutes. And it was basically a series of acts, nightclub acts. And one of them was Dorothy Loudon, who I just have always adored. I've been very lucky. I saw her in Annie. I saw her on Broadway in Noises Off and Ballroom. And so I've been a big fan forever. And I was asked to help her punch up her comedy. And I thought, this is the funniest woman I've ever seen. So I got to go to her apartment and work with her a little bit on the shape of what she was saying in the show. And it was kind of magical. And then I was asked to write a song for that show, an opening number for her, which my collaborator Jeff Saver and I did. And it was called Am I Too Broad for Broadway? And it was all about her being too broad, too big, and why no one was putting her in any shows. And I had her not being in Sunset Boulevard because she was scared of heights and the set went down. I had her not being on Showboat because she shimmied and the boat sank. Things like not being in Beauty and the Beast. Oh yeah, she was offered a role in Beauty and the Beast, but it was the bidet. And they cut that part. But it was all in song form, and I will never forget. It was like being in a movie. The show was in previews on Broadway. We wrote the song. We went and we sang it for the big Broadway producer, Alexander Cohen, in his apartment. Yeah. He called his wife in. He called his staff in. They were all hearing us sing it. They loved it. Then we had to do it for Dorothy. And I sang the song for Dorothy as Dorothy. And she looked at me and she said, I'm not singing that. Basically, she was not going to learn a new song while she was in previews. She knew she was in a show that was going to close pretty fast, and so it never got to Broadway. And it was kind of sad, but at the same time, at least I knew her. And then when we were casting the recording of Night of the Hunter, I picked up the phone and I called her, and she said yes. And then I wrote other special material for her, and she was just always as sweet as pie. She wanted Clabe and I to write a show for her. She wanted to do Pocketful of Miracle as Apple Annie. Wow. And we all watched the movie together in her apartment, and we thought it was not a good idea because the characters were too close to Guys and Dolls. They're the same characters. Yes. And so we didn't do it. And I regret that somewhat, but we didn't do that. And I didn't work with her on her memoirs, but she was a really dear friend and very, very fun. There's a new recording out, on British label of her nightclub act from 1960, and I just urge everyone to buy that CD, and I have nothing to do with that CD, but you will know exactly how funny that woman was, and a great, great singer to boot, and a great dramatic actress. She replaced Angela Lansbury in Sweeney Todd on Broadway. She was brilliant.
Oh, did she?
Oh, she's a brilliant Mrs. Lovett. Absolutely. She's amazing. And unfortunately gone now. But I had a nice little friendship with her. She was the kind of person you couldn't be too close to because she did have a drinking problem. And she could get really mean.
Right, yes.
Calls from her where she screamed at me and told me off, and the next day never remembered any of it. So.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so you couldn't get too close, or you'd wind up drinking too much.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I know her from the live recording of Lolita, My Love, which is the musical version of Lolita.
Brilliant.
Which I love. I think it's
a
fantastic. I mean, it's obvious why the failings, but I think it's a fantastic score, and she's amazing in it.
Yeah, I agree, and I wish I had seen that, but it closed in
Yes.
Boston, so it was. Yeah, it's the kind. Lolita will never succeed in that form, but boy, it's the best Lolita that ever could be, and I'm a major Alan J. Lerner fan, so
yes, me too.
By John Barry is wonderful. And she was great. She dies at the end of Act 1. And
it's one of those wonderful roles, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's the story.
Yeah.
I wish I could see it myself, but thank goodness for those live recordings.
Absolutely.
And like I say, get the one. It's Dorothy Loudon at the Blue Angel. You will hear what she was like in nightclubs, and she is fantastic. There's a lot of video clips too from that period on YouTube. Just look her up on the Dean Martin Show and lots of variety shows. She did a lot of TV.
There's a wonderful one with what's the one where she's drinking? Is it vodka? She's doing a Russian...
that was from one of the Tony Awards. The song "Vodka" from it's a obscure Gershwin song that she was forced to sing, and she made hilarious.
She made it brilliant. I mean, it was very, very good.
Yeah, we missed her on the Tony Awards. She used to appear all the time.
Now, you said that you didn't work with her on her biography, but you did work with Marni Nixon and Charles Strouse, didn't you?
Yes,
and Marni Nixon, of course, we've had on Musical Talk a couple of years back.
She had two other writers before I came along that she fired. I was up for it originally, but she had decided, oh no, I want to work with a female writer because she thought that they would capture her better. Being a ghost writer is what I was. Basically, she put it very succinctly, Marni. She said, I am the author and you are the writer. And that was very smart because it's her life, it's her stories, and I helped shape it for her and wrote in her voice. So she got rid of the two women that didn't work out and finally got to me. And I was able to capture her, I think, really well. But we had a year of putting her on the couch, basically. I was her analyst and therapist, and I got a lot out of her. And we just had a good friendship, a good time. And she saved everything, every piece of paper, she had stories that her mother had written down about the day she was born. She had hour by hour what it was like for her mother to be in labor. So, I mean, everything existed. It was really marvelous, and it was a great collaboration. And then the next one I did was with Charles Strouse, where I do not get any credit. It's a real ghostwriting job. And but that's what a ghost does if they decide not to take the credit. And I did. I took the money and not the credit.
It's a great book. I've got it, and it's I do enjoy it. He's one of my favorite composers.
Me too. Me too. And so I was able to do it. He has less respect for himself than we do, because he doesn't think that highly of his work. And I said, you're crazy. I said, you're fabulous.
Well, one of the last things that I like to touch on is the subject of forgotten musicals.
Sure.
Because I feel that we should mention this, because I think that probably when this goes out, we may put the link up somewhere. So I'm not going to give anyone details of this group, which is a secret group about forgotten musicals, simply because it has nearly 10,000 members.
The only reason it's a secret group is that it was starting to grow so rapidly to almost 10,000 members and become unmanageable to actually keep an eye on everybody, because it started to become not about forgotten musicals. It's a group on Facebook about forgotten musicals, very pure and simple. A wonderful guy named Robert Dutton, Dutton, started it, and I became an administrator and started as he drifted away from it. I kind of stayed, and that's how it happened. I didn't invent it, but because I have such a great affinity and knowledge and love for musicals that are not the everyday, and some of them are the everyday. Sometimes it's exciting to actually, put up some pictures from Oklahoma, from the
Yes.
original, or The Sound of Music, but it's celebrating musical theater in all of its glory, including the shows that closed out of town like Lolita and all the warts. And I think because it's Facebook, which I find a visual medium, I like doing a lot of pictures, and people have their opinions and they chat and they talk. It's not about news items. It's not about what's going on Playbill.com, but more so about really about the past, not about the present. The present,
it's a real celebration.
Oh, it's a celebration, absolutely. And musical theater's been going on. I still consider it an American art form, but I love every once in a while. I'm big. I love British musicals, and it's a whole parallel universe, British music of the 20th century. Some of them have never been heard up here, and I find it fascinating and wonderful. And, we went over there once Oklahoma happened in 1943 here, the Americans just invaded the West End.
Yes. And we got you back.
and changed everything. And yet then, then we get the 1-2 punch, and Cameron McIntosh exists. and he changes everything. But there is a different sensibility, I think, between the two. But it's wonderful to celebrate them on Forgotten Musicals. And there's a lot of characters there.
There are. And I mean, it's been an absolute, I have to say, it's an absolute joy to me. And it's one of those places. It's a group that I visit every day, because I will see pictures and I will read stories and people's anecdotes, and there's people on there who old Broadway stars and current Broadway stars.
There. I'm always in shock when somebody, says, well, I was an usher during Wildcat. And I go, oh, wow. That's fantastic. And then I get to meet a lot of these people because, they come through New York and they come to my shows, which is really fun. If I get to have people come to the shows and say, I'm on Forgotten Musical. It's like, oh, of course you are. For me, I use it to take myself out of reality. And that's why as soon as reality hits, if somebody puts an article about Hamilton sold too many tickets this week, I go, it's gone. We don't care about that. That's reality.
Yes, let's talk about the Clapham Wonder,
Exactly. Which I think if you quizzed, 10,000 of them there, 9,000 would not know.
But I think that's the wonderful and the joy of it, is that if you don't know, then it's there to find out. There's this, and for people who are listening to this who are members of this site, then there's that wonderful little search thing at the top where you can search the musical and you can find things. And occasionally I think I've done a couple of posts where I've discovered there isn't something about a show that I've known, and I thought, oh, I know that one and no one else does. I get very excited about that.
Exactly. I've gotten to the point where now there are reruns. I go back a couple of years and I go, okay, it's the same date and it's the same birthday. It's just 2 years older. We're going to use it.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and now I know that you're a big fan of Sandy Wilson's.
Oh, absolutely. Love
musicals. So, because we just mentioned the Clapham Wonder, which is his that is his forgotten and lost. I mean, there are several.
I don't know one note of it. I only know of it because reading about it, but never heard anything because there's no original recording that I know of. And maybe there are some there are recordings of everything out here in American shows. So I'm always surprised they don't pop up from there too. But I love Sandy. I love listening to. I think my favorite is The Buccaneer.
Oh yes, that is good fun.
Because you put that recording on and you go from beginning to end. That's just pure 50s musical comedy.
Yes, it is. Yes,
and it's not one of his pastiche shows. So you're not going, oh yeah, that sounds like that. That sounds like that. It's just delightful, and his lyrics were so good. I think he once said that Noel Coward said to him, "We're the only two good lyricists here." So, which is amazing for Coward to say to anybody. And I've always been a huge Coward fan, so any of that.
Well, he's also one of the books that you've written, isn't it? So
yes, that's the first book I wrote. It was a university, not a university press, but an academic press, and I knew the editor, and he said, "Why don't you do one of these books on a celebrity, a biobibliography?" And so I decided I would have a choice between Noel Coward or Betty Hutton.
Yeah.
Noel Coward. I'm glad I did. And I did so much research over here. And also I was in touch with the people in London. Graham Payne was still alive. I had everybody's blessing.
Wow.
And I had a great time working on that. And it's chock full of information and clippings that were disintegrating in my hands at the Lincoln Center Library from the 1920s. You would pick it up and it would just go turn to dust. So I would have to copy things really quickly. And that was fantastic. Fun. And that was a labor of love. That's the last labor of love book. After that,
right. Is that one still in print, available?
Oh, if you go on Amazon or eBay, it costs a fortune. I have one copy. It's not. For some reason, it's wildly expensive. It's gettable, but wildly expensive.
So we urge everybody to go out and find a copy and buy it. Well, thank you very much, Stephen. How can people find out more information about you and buy other cast recordings of your shows and also your books, and also catch up with your blog as well?
Well, I have a website, which is www.stephencolewriter, all one word with a PH in there, .com, which has a page for every one of my shows with a lot of videos and audios on there, lots of fun you can have during the day. And as far as the CDs are all available on Amazon, even the ones that are out of print, I think you can find. And books too, my Marnie Nixon book, my Charles Strauss book, even though my name's not on that one. That book about that girl, you can still get that on Amazon. The only book of mine that's hard to find is my Noel Coward biobibliography. And if you're super rich, you can get it online. I can't afford to buy it. Please visit my website. And if you visit my website, say hello. The email comes to me, and I love answering people. And take a look at all my other shows and enjoy.
I've chosen to end with this, which is Better Than Life, which is David Merrick trying to persuade Ethel Merman that showbiz is better than life, because I thought it was a great anthem for everyone who works in the business.
It is, and it turns out to be the great writer Peter Felicia's favorite of the songs. He did the liner notes on the CD, and I'm always surprised when he says, "Oh, that's my favorite song in the whole bunch," because I would have thought it would be one of the Merman songs. But it is delightful, and basically it's There's No Business Like Show Business, but from a producer's point of view who has no other life except show business. We come alive from, when it goes dark. That's
yes,
theater.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Stephen. And here we have Better Than Life.
Wait a minute, David. She's just a little girl, and she has to think about school and her dad and real life.
Real life, Ethel? Real life? You and I know there's something much bigger and better than life. Showbiz is better than life. Life is just living without the laughs. We get applause and give autographs. Showbiz is better.
I've been in this business longer than you, David. It's not all Skittles and beer and...
Showbiz is better than booze.
I like my scotch and I like my wine, but I can get high on a sold-out sign. Oh, what could be better?
The kid needs to graduate junior high.
School is nice, but kid, you gotta choose a textbook or a scrapbook full of rave reviews from the Times and News. How could you refuse?
She's just a kid, Goldie.
Showbiz is better than kids. You procreate and then set 'em loose.
Go produce kids' meat, I'll just produce. For that I don't need any alimony-seeking wife. Showbiz is better than life.
Wow and a half. This is like being in an MGM musical.
David, not everything is a song and dance.
Oh, Ethel, of course it is. Showbiz is better than sex. Sex is okay, but one day you'll know not every girl gets a standing O. Showbiz is better.
Showbiz is better than love. Love is divine when you're first embraced. Then you're old and you've been replaced.
Wait a minute. It's exactly like showbiz.
Take George Abbott, still alive at 83. The reason he lives on is...
Well, it ain't
The dough that brings on that glow.
It must be the show.
Really?
And the 10 girls he keeps at the Plaza Hotel.
Why, David, I never knew you could dance like that.
Join me, Ethel.
Why? Are you coming apart? Showbiz! Showbiz! All right, all right. Who can resist a song about showbiz? Hell, I made a whole movie about it. So, David, if you're serious about this, I'll take the kid under my wing and teach her. Now, do you want that, Muriel?
I'll take that as a yes. Marvin, draw up the contracts and I will draft a press release. And if Hal Prince tries to cast little Ronnie Howard as Tevye, I'll sue his ass. A 5, 6, 7, 8.
Showbiz is better than life. Life is a thing done from 9 to 5. We wait for dark to become alive. So pull out your drum, your cymbal, and your pipe.
And play a tune that says
Showbiz, showbiz is better than life.
This episode of Musical Talk presented and edited by Dominic McChesney. Copyright Musical Talk 2016, except in the case of the songs where the copyright remains with the creators.